She was 7 years old, both legs gone below the knee, and every single morning she dragged herself to the same dusty corner of the road, not to beg, not to cry, but to wait. Wait for the one man who never walked past without stopping. He was not rich, he barely had enough for himself: a cracked phone, worn-out shoes, a one-room apartment with a leaking roof. But every morning, without fail, he crouched down to her level, handed her a warm meal wrapped in foil, and said the same thing: "You are not forgotten, small one. I see you." The street laughed at him. "Why do you waste your money on a crippled beggar child who has nobody?" they said. He never answered. He couldn't explain it, the way his chest tightened every time he saw her eyes, the way something deep and broken inside him felt like it recognized her. He told himself it was just pity. He was wrong, because on the morning of her 8th birthday, the one she spent alone, on the ground, in the rain, she looked up at him, trembling, and said 5 words that shattered his entire world. "Papa, don't you know me?" Get comfortable, because what you are about to hear is not just a story. It is the kind of truth that will change the way you see every stranger you have ever walked past. Like this video and stay till the end, because what this little girl says will break you. His name was Kofi Mensah, 34 years old, a mechanic who worked 6 days a week in a garage near the central market of Accra, Ghana. Most people who knew Kofi described him the same way: quiet, reliable, closed. Not unfriendly, just sealed, like a house where all the windows were shut and the curtains drawn, but inside there was still light. You could see it flickering faintly through the fabric. He had lived alone for 3 years. 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days. Though Kofi never counted, he just felt it, the weight of it, the specific silence of a home that used to have noise in it. He had been married once. Her name was Adwa, bright-eyed, loud-laughing Adwa, who burned everything she cooked and didn't care, who sang off-key to the radio every evening, who made Kofi feel like the world was larger than it had seemed before he met her. They had a daughter together, Akua, named after Kofi's late mother, born on a rainy Thursday morning with a face so perfectly calm the nurse whispered, "This one has seen the world before." Kofi had held her in the delivery room and wept, the kind of weeping a man does only twice in his life if he is lucky, the kind where nothing is wrong and everything is simply too much to contain. That was the last perfect moment he remembered. 6 months later, Adwa neft. No warning, no fight big enough to explain it. Just a morning where Kofi woke up and the apartment was different, quieter, emptier, the kind of empty that has shape. She had taken Akua. And a note on the kitchen counter, 5 lines long, that ended with, "Don't look for us. It will be better this way. I'm sorry." Kofi had stood in that kitchen for a very long time. He had not eaten that day, or the next. He filed a missing persons report. The police told him Adwa had taken the child voluntarily. No crime had been committed. They said these things happen. They said give it time. He hired a private investigator with every coin he could scrape together. The man found nothing, or said he found nothing, which Kofi later realized were not the same thing. He searched for 2 years. Then, slowly, the searching became something else. Not giving up, he would never call it that, but a kind of survival, a decision to keep breathing and working and eating and sleeping, because what else was there? He moved to a smaller apartment. He worked more hours. He stopped talking about Akua to anyone, because every time he said her name out loud, something in his face changed in a way that made people uncomfortable. He kept one photograph, tucked inside the front cover of his work notebook, creased down the middle from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times. Akua, 6 months old, asleep on his chest, one tiny fist gripping the collar of his shirt. He looked at it every morning, and then he went to work.
He first saw her on a Tuesday. He was walking to work the way he always did. Same route, same time, same plastic bag with a sandwich and a bottle of water. She was sitting at the corner of Timber Market Road, just outside the gates of a closed hardware shop. Small, much too small. She was sitting flat on the ground, not on a mat, not on cardboard, just the bare concrete, with her shortened legs stretched out in front of her, wrapped in strips of old cloth. She wasn't begging. That was the first thing Kofi noticed. She wasn't holding out a cup, wasn't making eye contact with passers-by, wasn't calling out for help. She was just sitting, looking at the ground, her hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for a bus that she already knew wasn't coming. There was a tin cup beside her. Someone had placed it there, clearly, because it held a few coins, and she hadn't touched them. Kofi slowed, then stopped. He didn't know why. He passed beggars every day. This street had several. He gave when he could, walked past when he couldn't, the way everyone does. But this child made him stop. She couldn't have been more than 6, maybe 7. Her hair was uncombed, her dress was torn at the shoulder, and her face was the face of a child who had stopped expecting things. That face. Something about that face. Kofi crouched down. "Hey," he said softly. "Are you hungry?" The girl looked up. Her eyes were dark and still and extraordinarily calm. Not the calm of peace, but the calm of someone who has been through enough that panic no longer seems worth the energy. She nodded once, small, careful. Kofi opened his plastic bag and gave her his sandwich, both halves. She ate slowly, deliberately, the way children eat when they are not sure when the next meal is coming and they want to remember the taste. When she finished, she looked up at him again and said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Thank you, mister." "What is your name?" Kofi asked. She hesitated. "Abina." "Who do you stay with, Abina?" A long pause, then, "Nobody now." He asked one more question. "How old are you?" She held up 7 fingers, then dropped her hand and looked at the ground again, like the conversation had cost her something she could not afford. Kofi stood up. He was already late for work. He walked 3 steps, stopped, turned back. "I'll bring you breakfast tomorrow, proper breakfast, okay?" The girl did not answer immediately. She looked at him with those still, measuring eyes. Then she said, "People say that." Kofi felt those 2 words like a key turning in a lock. "I know they do. I'll still be here." And he was. The next morning, and the one after that, and every morning for the next 8 months. The breakfasts became a ritual. Kofi would wake 40 minutes earlier than he needed to, walk to the small chop bar 3 streets from his apartment, buy a warm meal, rice and beans or yam porridge, or on good days, an egg with bread. Wrap it carefully and carry it to the corner. Abina was always there before him, already sitting, already watching the road. He would crouch down, always at her level, never standing over her, and they would talk. The conversations started small: food, weather, the noisiness of the market. Then slowly, over weeks, they grew. She told him she had been brought to Accra by a woman she called Auntie. Not a real auntie, she clarified carefully, just a woman who had said she would take care of her. "Where did Auntie go?" Kofi asked one morning.
Abina was quiet for a moment. She went to find work in another city. She said she would send money back and someone would come to get me. Nobody came. How long ago? Before the rainy season. That was nearly 5 months. Kofi's jaw tightened. He asked where she slept. She pointed down an alley. There was a covered walkway behind one of the shops where several children slept on old foam. "Aren't you afraid at night?" She shrugged. "I used to be. Then I got too tired to be afraid." Kofi went home that evening and sat in his apartment and stared at the wall for a long time. He thought about reporting her to social services. He knew what happened to children in the system. He'd grown up near enough to one to know that it was not always better than the street. He thought about taking her in and immediately told himself he was being reckless, a single man, a mechanic, living in a one-room apartment. What kind of guardian was that? But then he thought about what she'd said. "I got too tired to be afraid." He did not sleep well that night. The next morning he brought her breakfast and also a small blanket, second-hand, clean, folded neatly inside a plastic bag. She looked at it, then looked at him. "This is for me?" "Yes." She held it against her chest for a moment with both hands, not unfolding it, just holding it, and Kofi had to look away. Because her face in that moment was the face of someone receiving something they had quietly given up hoping for. And it broke something open in him. He had not felt that particular breaking in a long time. Not since Akua. Here's what Kofi told no one. Every time he looked at Abina, something happened to him that he could not explain. It was not just sympathy. He felt sympathy for other children, for the adults who slept outside the bank, for the old woman who sold groundnuts at the junction. This was different. This was the specific physical sensation of recognition, like a word on the tip of your tongue, like a song you know but cannot name, like a place you are certain you have been before, even though your memory says no. Her eyes especially, dark, still, steady, with a particular way of looking at him that made him feel seen in a way he could not explain and did not want to examine too closely. He told himself it was projection. He was a man who had lost a daughter, so naturally his mind found echoes of her everywhere. He told his coworker Emmanuel about the girl one afternoon, just the basic details, the corner, the breakfasts, the abandoned child. Emmanuel looked at him sideways. "Brother, how old is this girl?" 7. "And your daughter would be?" A long silence. 7, Kofi said quietly. Emmanuel put down his wrench. "Kofi." "It's not her," Kofi said immediately. "She looks nothing like Akua. Her name is Abina. She was brought from somewhere else. It's just what?" Emmanuel asked. Kofi picked up his wrench and went back to work. "Nothing," he said. "Forget I said anything." But that night, for the first time in 3 years, he took the photograph out of his notebook and held it under the light for a long, long time. Akua, 6 months old. Those eyes, dark, still, measuring, with a particular way of looking at him even then. He put the photograph away. He told himself he was being foolish. He was not being foolish.
On a Friday, 3 weeks after the blanket, Kofi arrived at the corner, and Abina was not there. He waited. 5 minutes. 10. He asked the woman who sold plantain chips nearby. She had seen Kofi's morning ritual for months and regarded him with quiet curiosity. The child? A woman came for her this morning, well-dressed, said she was the child's family. Kofi's stomach dropped. What did she look like? Young, yellow dress, nice shoes. He looked down the street both ways. Nothing. He was late to work. He didn't care. He asked 6 more people in the surrounding streets if they had seen a small girl with a yellow-dressed woman. 2 of them pointed him toward the main road. He found them at the taxi park. The woman, late 20s, bright fabric dress, weave hair, large handbag, was pulling Abina firmly by the wrist toward a waiting taxi. Abina's face was pale with resistance, her feet dragging. "Hey!" Kofi walked fast. "Hey, stop!" The woman turned. Her eyes went from surprised to immediately hostile. "What do you want? Where are you taking her?" "She is my niece, my family business. Who are you?" "She told me she has no family. She is a child, she doesn't know everything." The woman pulled Abina again. Abina looked at Kofi over her shoulder, not with the calm she usually wore, but with something raw and frightened and urgent. Kofi blocked the door of the taxi. "Abina," he said, keeping his voice steady, "do you want to go with this woman?" The woman hissed, "You dare?" "Abina." The girl looked at the woman, then at Kofi, then back at the woman. "She says she will take me to Auntie," Abina said quietly. "But—" She stopped. "But what?" Kofi asked. "But Auntie doesn't want me. She said so before she left." The taxi driver was getting impatient. A small crowd was beginning to gather. The yellow-dressed woman changed tactic. She smiled, a bright, practiced smile, and turned to the bystanders. "My niece runs away, we worry for months. Now a strange man is blocking us from taking her home? Someone explain to me what is happening here." Several people looked at Kofi with sudden suspicion. "Who is this man to the child?" someone said. "He feeds her sometimes," the plantain woman said, who had followed. "Every morning, that one." "Why is a man feeding a strange girl child every morning?" another voice said. Kofi felt the crowd turning. He knew this shape, this moment where the narrative slips away from the truth and toward the simpler, more dramatic story. He took a breath. "I am going to call the police," he said calmly. "If she is truly your niece, you will have documents, birth records, a family address. The police will come and verify everything, and then she can go with you." He took out his phone. The woman looked at him for a long, calculating moment. Then she let go of Abina's wrist. "Fine, keep your beggar child. She is more trouble than she is worth anyway." She got into the taxi without looking back. The taxi pulled away. Abina stood very still, looking at the ground. Kofi crouched down to her level. "Are you okay?" She nodded, then, after a long pause, "She was going to sell me." The words landed like stones in still water. "What?" Kofi, the voice came out barely above a whisper. "The last time a woman like that came, the boy who slept near me in the walkway went with her. He never came back. The other children said she sells them to work in houses far away." Kofi sat down on the curb. He put his face in his hands. He stayed like that for a while. Then he stood up, looked at Abina, and said, "You're not sleeping in that walkway anymore." His landlord, Ya, was a broad-shouldered woman of 60 who had seen everything in her long life as a landlord and considered herself entirely unsurprisable. She was wrong. When Kofi arrived at her door that evening with a small girl on a makeshift low board, a piece of flat wood Kofi had fashioned with wheels so Abina could move herself, she looked at the child, looked at Kofi, and said, "Is this yours?" "I don't know yet," Kofi said. Ya looked at him for a long time. Then she opened the door wider and said, "Command and eat first before you explain." She fed them both. She listened to the whole story without interruption. The corner, the breakfasts, the yellow-dressed woman, the boy who didn't come back. When Kofi finished, she sat back and folded her arms. "You know what you're getting into. A man alone with a girl child? People will talk." "Let them," Kofi said. "The social welfare people will ask questions. I'll answer them." Ya looked at Abina, who had been quiet through all of this, eating her rice carefully. "Child, are you comfortable with this man?" Abina looked up. She thought for a moment, truly thought, with the seriousness of someone for whom this was not a small question. "He has never lied to me," she said.
He said he would come back, and he always came back. Mame-Ya unfolded her arms. There is a small room next to the store at the back. It is not big, but it is safe. No extra rent, not yet. You get the paperwork done first. Kofi looked at her. Why are you helping? Mame-Ya stood and started clearing the dishes. Because I had a daughter once who nobody helped. That is all. Now go, I have things to do. The next week was a chaos of paperwork, office visits, and bureaucratic waiting rooms. Social welfare, Department of Child Development, police reports, medical assessments. A social worker named Mrs. Opong, stern-faced, efficient, with reading glasses she wore on the end of her nose, came to inspect Kofi's apartment and interview him alone. She asked him pointed questions. Why no biological family? Why had he not reported the child earlier? What were his intentions? Kofi answered everything honestly. He did not try to make himself sound better than he was. At the end of the interview, Mrs. Opong looked at him over her glasses. You are a single man with a one-room apartment and a mechanic's salary. By all assessments, you are not the ideal guardian. No, Kofi agreed. And yet that child in the next room, Mrs. Opong said quietly, has the first full night of sleep she has had in months, I can tell. She closed her file. I will process the temporary guardianship. It is not permanent. We will review in 90 days. Do not give me a reason to reverse this decision. I won't, Kofi said. That night, he sat on the edge of his bed and looked at the thin slice of light coming from under the door of Abina's small room, the storeroom Mame-Ya had cleaned out and furnished with a mattress and a shelf and a small curtain over the one window. The light was on because Abina was still awake, reading the one book she had asked for when he offered to buy her something, a battered children's Bible with illustrations that she handled like a treasure. He looked at that strip of light for a long time. Then he took out his photograph of Akua and held it and breathed. 2 children, one lost, one found. He told himself they were not connected. He told himself that every day.
The 3 months of the guardianship review period were the most complicated life of Kofi's. Not because things went badly, because they went unexpectedly well, and that was harder to carry. Abina enrolled in a nearby school for children with physical disabilities, a place Mrs. Opong had helped arrange, run by a quiet organization that didn't make a spectacle of its work. She was placed in a class with children of her age. On her second day, the teacher sent a note home. Kofi read it standing at the gate, still in his work clothes. Abina is one of the most attentive students I have had in 12 years of teaching. Please tell her that her answer to the question about rivers was the best in the class. Kofi folded the note and put it in his chest pocket. He didn't say anything when Abina got home. He just made her the dinner she had once mentioned as her favorite, rice with light soup and chicken, and placed it in front of her. She looked at him suspiciously. What is this for? Rivers, he said. Her eyes went wide. Then she smiled. It was the first full smile he had seen from her. It stopped his breath. Not because of how beautiful it was, though it was, but because of something in the architecture of it. Something in the specific way the left corner lifted slightly higher than the right. He had seen that smile before. He had held it, fed it, sung it to sleep. He pushed the thought away immediately, firmly. He told himself he was losing his mind. But that night, he took out the photograph again, and for the first time, he held it next to his phone and looked at a photo he had taken of Abina last week. She had been laughing at something Mame-Ya said, unaware of the camera. He looked at both photos for a very long time. The shape of the eyes, the slight tilt of the head, the smile. He put both photos down. He sat on the edge of his bed and pressed his fists against his knees and breathed. No, he said to the empty room. No, it is not possible. You are a desperate man, seeing what you want to see. Stop it. He stopped it. For another month. Abina got sick in the second month.
It started as an ordinary cold, a cough, a runny nose, the kind of thing that moves through schools like weather. By the third day, it had become a fever. By the fourth night, it was serious. Kofi sat beside her mattress in the small back room, pressing a damp cloth to her forehead, watching her chest rise and fall, counting the breaths. The clinic had given her medication. Mrs. Opong had checked in by phone. Mama Ya had made pepper soup and stood at the door and prayed in a low murmur. But at 2 a.m, the fever spiked. Abina began to talk in her sleep. Kofi leaned in. Her words were broken, feverish, not fully formed, the kind of fragments that surface when the conscious mind is too exhausted to maintain its careful gaits. "Not going," she muttered. "Don't go." "I'm here," he said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." "Mama said," she continued, her eyelids fluttering, "said Papa would come, said he was looking." Kofi went very still. "Said his name," Abina breathed. "Kofi," she said his name was Kofi. The room went sideways. Kofi sat back on his heels. He could not breathe. He sat very still for a very long time, listening to her breathing slowly even out as the fever began to break. His hands were shaking. "No," he whispered. "No, she is delirious. Children say things in fever. It means nothing." He stayed awake all night. He did not say anything to Abina when she woke the next morning, weak but cooler, fever-broken, blinking at him with those steady, dark eyes. "You were here all night?" she asked. "Yes." She looked at him for a moment. "You did not have to." "I know." She looked at the ceiling. "My mother used to do that," she said quietly. "Sit by me when I was sick." Kofi did not move. "What was your mother's name?" he asked. His voice was steady, careful. Abina turned her head toward the wall. "I don't want to talk about her," she said. "Okay," Kofi said. "She left," Abina added after a long pause. "People always leave." "Not always," Kofi said. Abina turned back to look at him, those dark, still, measuring eyes. "You haven't left," she said. "No, I haven't." He made her soup. He helped her to the bathroom. He went to work 2 hours late and didn't explain. That evening he called Emmanuel. "I need you to help me find someone," he said. "A woman named Ajoa, my wife, my ex-wife. I need to find her." There was a long pause on the line. "Brother," Emmanuel said slowly, "what happened?" "I'll explain later. I need to find her. I need to ask her something." "What?" Kofi was quiet for a moment. "I need to ask her if our daughter is alive." Emmanuel knew people. That was his value. Not mechanically, though he was competent enough with an engine, but socially. He knew people in the police. He knew a woman who worked in the National Records Office. He knew a retired social worker who, for a small consideration, could run a search through databases that civilians were not supposed to access. He did all of this quietly, without flamfare, over the next 2 weeks. Kofi did not tell Abina what he was doing. He was terrified of being wrong.
"I'm here," Kofi said. "I'm here." He sat down and played the game and laughed at Mama Ya's terrible timing and let Abena beat him twice and ate the small piece of cake Mama Ya had made and held everything else inside him, sealed and still, waiting. He went to Tema alone. He did not tell Emmanuel the day he was going. He did not tell Mama Ya where he was headed. He arranged for Abena's school pickup with a neighbor, said he had a work errand, and drove the 30 kilometers along the coast road in the early morning. Ajoa's address was a compound house in a neighborhood close to the industrial area, the kind of place where the sea air mixed with the smell of chemical factories, and the buildings were old and salt-eaten. He sat in his car outside for 20 minutes.
Then he knocked on the gate. A boy of about 12 answered. Kofi asked for a joie mensa. The boy disappeared, returned. She says, "Who are you?" Tell her it's Kofi. A long wait. Then she came through the inner door. He had not seen her in 3 years and 2 months. She was thinner. The brightness he remembered in her face had been replaced by something careful and guarded. She was wrapped in a cloth against the morning chill, her hair tied back, and she held herself in the doorway like she was ready to retreat. When she saw him, her face went through 4 expressions in rapid sequence: recognition, fear, guilt, and then a strange, exhausted relief. "Kofi," she said. "Kofi," he said, "I need you to tell me about Aqua." The last expression collapsed. She pressed her hand over her eyes, and then she stepped back and let him in. They sat in a small courtyard at the back of the compound, on plastic chairs, with a cup of water each that neither of them touched. She told him everything. After she had left, she did not explain why she had left, and he did not ask yet. Aqua got sick, a foot infection that spread. By the time she took her to hospital, the damage was too severe. "They took both her legs," Ajwa said. Her voice was flat, drained of everything. "Below the knee. She was 4 years old. She came out of the surgery and she looked at me and she said, 'Mama, where are my feet?' And I—" She stopped. Kofi waited. "I broke," she said. "I know there is no excuse for what happened next. I know that. I had no money. I had no family nearby. I had health problems of my own. I know none of that matters. But I broke. And I found a woman, a church woman. I thought she was safe. I paid her what I had. I thought I was getting her proper care. I thought—" "You thought," Kofi said quietly. She flinched. "What was this woman's name?" "Sister Comfort. She ran a home," she said, "in Accra." "And then?" "And then I got worse, medically. I was in and out of hospital. When I came out the last time, I went back to find Sister Comfort, and she had moved. The house was rented to someone else. Nobody could tell me where she went." Her voice cracked. "I have been looking for Aqua for 2 years. I put up posts everywhere. I went to the police. I went to welfare. Nobody could find a child matching her description. I thought—" She could not finish the sentence. "You thought she was dead." Ajwa pressed both hands over her face and shook. Kofi sat very still for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and took out his phone. He had taken a photograph of Abena that morning, her sitting at the kitchen table with her textbook, oblivious, caught in a moment of complete concentration. He turned the screen to face Ajwa. Ajwa lowered her hands. She looked at the screen, and the sound she made was not a cry. It was something below a cry, something physical and ancient, the sound of a woman's body recognizing its child the way the body recognizes everything that truly matters, before the mind can process, before language can form, in the gut, in the chest, in the throat simultaneously. "Aqua," she breathed. Just that, just the name, like breathing, was all she could do. "Her name now is Abena," Kofi said carefully. "Someone gave her a new name, but yes, I believe it is her." Ajwa was shaking. "How long have you had her?" 3 months. "You didn't know?" "No, I only began to suspect recently." Ajwa looked at him, and her face held something that was not quite guilt, and not quite gratitude, and not quite grief, but all 3 at once. Does she remember me?" Kofi was quiet for a moment. "She said her mother used to sit by her when she was sick. She said her mother told her that her father was looking for her. She said her father's name was Kofi." Ajwa broke completely. She wept in a way that was not graceful, not the cinematic weeping of grief neatly resolved, but the ugly, shuddering, years-long kind. Kofi did not comfort her. He sat and waited and felt his own complicated feelings. The anger, yes, always the anger, but also the grief and the pity and the strange, terrible compassion for someone who had failed catastrophically and now was being destroyed by it. When she was quieter, he said, "I am going to have a DNA test done, quietly, through the medical clinic. If it confirms what I believe, then we will need to talk about what happens next." Ajwa nodded. She had nothing left to argue with. "What will you tell her?" "The truth, but carefully and slowly. She is a child who has already been abandoned too many times. We will not rush this." He stood to leave. At the gate, he stopped. "One more thing," he said without turning around. "The reason you left 3 years ago, the real reason." A long silence. "I was scared," Ajwa said quietly, "of being poor forever. There was a man, he had money, he said he would take care of us. I believed him. And he didn't, and I couldn't come back after what I had done. I was ashamed." Kofi stood in the gateway for a moment. Then he walked to his car. He drove back to Accra. He did not cry until he was on the coast road, the sea on his left, the city beginning to appear on his right, and then he pulled off the road and sat with his forehead on the steering wheel and cried in the way that men cry when they are finally sure it is safe to do so. The DNA results came back on a Thursday. Kofi sat in the clinic's small consultation room with the paper in his hands and read the result 3 times. 99.98% probability of paternity. He folded the paper, put it in his pocket, thanked the doctor, walked to the nearest church. He was not especially religious, but it was the nearest quiet building. He sat in the last pew and held the paper against his chest. Aqua, his daughter. She had been 7 meters from him for 8 months. She had waited at that corner every day, not knowing. He walked past her every morning for a week before he stopped. He thought about that week. He thought about the mornings he had been late, the mornings he had taken a different route, the mornings that might have been, the alternate world where he never crouched down, never spoke, never handed over that first sandwich. He sat in the church for a long time. Abena's birthday was in 2 weeks. He had already planned something small, a cake, a school friend she had mentioned once, a trip to the beach she had asked about once and immediately retracted, embarrassed by her own wanting. He decided that was when he would tell her.
He spent the next 2 weeks preparing, not the party, but himself. He talked to Mrs. Apong, who brought in a child psychologist, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Asante, who met with Abena twice under the guise of a school wellness check. Dr. Asante's assessment, Abena was resilient, grounded, had formed a strong and secure attachment to Kofi in a remarkably short time. She was ready, with care, to receive difficult truths. "She already knows something is different," Dr. Asante told Kofi privately. "Children always know. She is waiting for you to trust her with it." The morning of the birthday, Kofi made her favorite breakfast, eggs and bread and sweet tea, and put 8 small candles in a cupcake because she refused to be given a large cake. She said it was wasteful, and Kofi had laughed at her practicality. She sat across from him at the small kitchen table, still in her nightclothes, and looked at the candles. "Make a wish," he said. She looked at him seriously for a moment. "I already have what I wanted to wish for," she said. He looked at her. "What did you want?" She looked at the candle flame. "To not be alone anymore." Kofi reached across the table and took her hand. "Abena," he said, "there's something I need to tell you, something important, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything, okay? All the way to the end." She went still,
those eyes, watching him. "Okay," she said. He told her, slowly, carefully, all of it. His marriage, her birth, the leaving, the searching, the years, the corner, the photograph, the fever in the words she had spoken, the hospital record, Tema, the DNA test. He laid it all in front of her, like an offering, like evidence, like the most important argument he had ever made. She did not cry. She sat very still and listened. When he finished, the kitchen was absolutely quiet. Then she said, "I remember the name, Kofi. Mama said it once when she thought I was asleep." "What did she say?" "She said, 'Your father's name is Kofi. He would have stayed. I should have let him stay.'" Kofi pressed his lips together hard. Abina looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "Papa, don't you know me?" 5 words. The same 5 words he had dreamed about without knowing he was dreaming them. He got up from his chair and knelt in front of her. Knelt, the way you kneel before something sacred. And she leaned forward, and he held her, and she let him. She did not cry immediately. She just let herself be held. And then slowly, in the way of rivers reaching the sea, inevitably, irresistibly, after a very long journey, she wept. And so did he. And Mama Ya, who had been listening at the door she thought she had closed silently, wept too. The justice came quietly, the way true justice usually does, not as drama, but as consequence. 3 months after the birthday, Emmanuel's contact in the police sent him a message. The woman in the yellow dress, her name they had eventually established was Vivian, had been arrested. Not because of Abina, because of others. She had been running a trafficking operation for years, not large-scale, not international, but a steady, ugly trade of children from the streets, placed as domestic workers in homes where they were not treated as children at all. The boy who had disappeared from the alley walkway, the one Abina had mentioned on the curb, was found in a house in a wealthy neighborhood of Accra, working as a houseboy, unpaid, not allowed to attend school. He was returned to a family that had been searching for him. Vivian went to prison. It was in the newspapers for 2 days, and then forgotten, the way these things are. But Kofi read the article twice, and then set it aside, and said nothing to Abina about it. She was 8 years old, and did not need to know the full shape of what she had escaped. There was time for that. The legal process of establishing paternity and full guardianship took 4 more months. Mrs. Apong, who had by now entirely dropped her official composure and regularly brought them food on her welfare check visits, which were more social calls than inspections, guided them through each step. Dr. Asante continued to see Abina weekly. And Adwa. That was the complicated part. Abina knew about her mother. Kofi had told her carefully, with Dr. Asante present, everything that was age-appropriate to know. Abina went silent for a long time. "Is she sorry?" she had finally asked. "Yes," Kofi said. "I believe she is." Another long silence. "I don't want to see her yet, but maybe one day. Maybe one day is enough for now," Dr. Asante said. Adwa was informed. She wept again. She seemed to have an inexhaustible reserve of tears, which Kofi thought was probably appropriate. She said, "Maybe one day. That is more than you deserve, and more than I expected. Don't waste it." "I won't," Adwa said. Kofi believed her. Not because she was trustworthy, he could not assess that yet, but because she was broken enough to be honest, and broken people who are honest sometimes rebuild into something real. He would see.
A year after their first meeting, on a Tuesday morning, Kofi and Abena walked together to the corner of Timber Market Road. Abena moved on new prosthetic legs, properly fitted, properly cared for, provided through a program that Mrs. Opong had connected them with. She walked slowly but steadily. She was learning. She had insisted on walking, not being carried. She was that kind of person. They stood at the corner where the hardware shop gate still stood, a bit more rusted now, under the same thick morning sky. Abena looked at the spot on the ground where she used to sit. Kofi stood beside her and said nothing. After a while, she said, "I used to watch people walk past and think nobody saw me." "I saw you," Kofi said. "You stopped." "Yes." She looked up at him. "Why did you stop? The first time, before you knew?" Kofi thought about it. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Something in me recognized something in you. I couldn't name it. I just knew I couldn't walk past." Abena was quiet. "I think I knew too," she said finally. "Not with my head, but somewhere else." She reached up and took his hand. They stood there for a moment, father and daughter, at the corner where a story had either ended or begun. It was hard to say which, and perhaps it didn't matter. Then she tugged his hand. "Come on," she said. "I don't want to be late for school." "Yes, madam." They walked. The street moved around them, buses, vendors, the noise and heat and color of a city morning going about its life. And Kofi, walking beside his daughter, at last, thought about all the mornings he had spent on this same street without her, and how a person can carry a loss so long they almost forget it is a loss. It simply becomes the shape of them. And then one morning, the shape changes, and you realize you have been walking towards something all along. There is a moment in this story that I want you to sit with. Not the DNA result, not the birthday revelation, not the tears. The moment I want you to hold is earlier, simpler, harder. It is the week before Kofi stopped. The 6 mornings he walked past the same corner, the same child, and kept going. Because he was tired, because he was late, because people walk past people without stopping every single day of their lives and never know what they walked past. He almost walked past his own daughter 7 times. Think about that. Think about the people you walk past, the ones sitting too still, the ones who have the face of someone who has given up expecting things. You cannot know who they are. You cannot know what they carry, what they have lost, who is looking for them. But you can stop. You can crouch down to their level. You can say, "I see you." It may cost you a sandwich and 40 minutes of sleep, or it may change everything. Tell me in the comments, have you ever walked past someone and felt that pull, that sense of recognition you couldn't explain, and kept going? Or did you stop? What happened? I want to know. I really, truly want to know. If this story moved something in you, share it, not for the numbers, because someone in your circle may need to hear it today. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story is already waiting, and it will find you exactly when you need it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. You are not the kind of person who walks past. I know that about you. See you soon.